Welcome inside another episode of Point to the Passer. It's been since early December since we hopped on to record an episode, and a lot has happened since then. Cardiac Carolina, as we've come to know them, has been in a lot of close games. Win some, lose some, overtime some. It's been an absolute roller coaster with a big one coming up on Saturday at Duke. Jonathan, good to be back on with you. We've got a lot to catch up on since we were previewing the Alabama game with very high hopes for this team back in early December. Now we're talking about being a bubble team, or worse, maybe an NIT team. So as a fan, let me ask first, and as your friend, how are you? Are you okay? We can treat this like a therapy session if we need to. Talk to me.
2 weeks till Carolina baseball, Craig.
I'm here for it.
We're
Yeah,
we're
we're
looking
talking
good.
spring
Diamond
training.
Heels. Diamond Heels are looking good for this season. I think that a good chance to return to Omaha. Two
Good,
more weeks, man. That's what the focus is.
good. Weather starts to warm up. Start talking about the Bosch. Maybe you can
Yeah,
make a trip
exactly.
down.
Who doesn't love going to the Bosch in February? When when it's this winter has actually been like North Carolina standards, a real winter.
Right.
Um, you're right. I mean, it's obviously a ton has happened since December, since the SEC Challenge. A lot of games have been played, and unfortunately, a lot of losses have stacked up. It's been a really frustrating year as a fan. I can only imagine as the players and coaches for this Carolina team how frustrated they are, and I think it seems like it's getting to a point where the frustration has built to a point where that can really impact the trajectory, but also just the psyche of this team going forward. So that's something to continue to watch because I think that Pitt game was maybe the first game where you really started to see that at the end of the game in terms of body language. Up until that point, it felt like there've been so many close games, and you didn't know if Carolina was going to pull the game out or not, but you could count on them fighting till the end of it.
Mhm.
And again, human nature, losses start to stack up, tension starts to build
Sure.
within a team when you're frustrated, disappointed, you're not meeting expectations, pressure is mounting, all of those things. So that would be something that I'd kind of have my eye on. Um, in some ways, the Duke game coming up on Saturday is a potential reset in the way that it's a rivalry game. So that is the focus, regardless of what the record is going in. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a lot to talk about with this team now, firmly on the bubble, or in some cases, off the bubble at this point in the season.
Yeah, the last three or four in particular have been a really tough stretch. You have a 1 point loss to Stanford, a 1 point loss to Wake Forest, a game that I decided to make a road trip to. We'll have some takeaways from that as well, and we'll also do some previews of the Duke game and some other games coming up. But the last three of four have been really tough. You have an overtime win against just not a good Boston College team, and then you take the loss at Pitt. That could easily have been an 0-4 stretch going in early ACC play, which you just cannot afford. Every fan knows that. And from the comments we've been reading on Twitter and our community, there is a lot of fan frustration, and it's understood. It's kind of hard right now. You and I have talked about this to figure out where to pinpoint that frustration. There's a lot of changes in this league in general with NIL, with money issues, with players only staying 1 year and then going somewhere else. If you look on some of these websites about where these players came from, they're listing 3 schools, 4 schools now before getting to their final destination. So there's a lot of questions on just the game is changing right now. A lot of people are pointing their fingers at Hubert, which I understand to an extent. It does start with coaching, but there's also player execution. So I think the first place that I want to start with you right now is what is your overall take on what has gone wrong, not just in the last week or two, but kind of the upside of we're seeing some of these peaks and then we're seeing some of these valleys. Why can't this team be consistent so far?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's one of those things, and Hubert has alluded to this a lot, where he gets asked similar questions or what went wrong in a specific game, and he lists off 8 to 10 things. So I don't think it's one thing. We can get into some of the specific things. Where I'm going with it is it's fitting that we're playing Duke on February 1st because the next day is Groundhog Day, because it feels like this entire season has been one big Groundhog Day in
Yeah,
terms
you
of
know what
playing
to
the same
expect.
game over and over again.
Hmm.
For that non-conference schedule, it was primarily we get down big in the first half, and there were so many games, right? Whether it was Kansas, obviously, and then uh, Michigan State, Auburn, the game before that, Florida, just go down the list where we're down by double digits.
Hmm.
Even the Dayton comeback that tied that 21-point comeback against Florida State in the 90s. So that was the formula was we were going to get down big against the better teams, high major teams, but then find a way to claw back and at least have a chance at the end of the game. And in a couple of cases, like Dayton and UCLA, actually pull the game out.
Hmm.
As we got into conference play in January, it's been you started to see Carolina actually build some working margins in the first half, and even like at Pitt up 10 in the first half. But then typically it's like the last 3 or 4 minutes of the half where, for whatever reason, we have a lull, we have a drought from the field, the offense starts to stall out. And it's not just the offense. Like, I think the offense is a significant issue for sure. But it's a couple of like a lack of focus or just some poor decisions that lead to turnovers. And it feels like every single turnover is a live ball turnover that turns into a fast break for the other team. So one of the areas that we thought going into the year that really needed to be an advantage for Carolina was fast break points, given the way they wanted to play, has not been. Pitt outscores Carolina in fast break points, in that game the other night. So that's something that has really been a hallmark of some of the conference games, and just not being able to sustain or build out leads, stretch out leads, sustain success in games. So there's a lot of different things going on. I think the other thing that I'd add would be it feels like this team plays tight quite a bit.
Very much.
And even in times where you thought maybe they come out and play pretty loose, like I thought that after the game at Wake, you come home against Boston College and maybe play one of your better games of the season. And that just wasn't the case. Offensively, they played a lot better, but defensively, it was an absolute mess. So there's the feeling the pressure, like real awareness of those losses early in the season building, which I think it takes a toll, especially with this type of team where it seems like they're really hearing a lot of that noise. And now it's at a point where that's really reached a tipping point. Um, so that's one piece of it, I would say, just playing tight, but on the court as well, communication has been a real issue. And that's been something that we've heard Hubert talked about. We've heard like folks who do reporting for Inside Carolina have talked a lot about just this being a quiet team.
Hmm.
And Hubert's really had to push them to communicate, especially on the defensive end. And when that got a little bit better at Notre Dame and at NC State, you see some of the results. You see Jalen Washington starting to emerge. And that's why that Boston College game especially was so frustrating, because it all
Hmm.
just falls apart.
Sure.
And it almost looks like, well, it really is. You might as well just be running dummy offense on the other side where you can just run whatever you want. You're going to get to the rim. You're going to get the shot that you want. And that's what happened. I mean, that's how a bad Boston College team scores in the 90s against Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my takeaways from Wake Forest, and it may be a minor thing, and maybe I'm just nitpicking, but I always kind of try to pick up when I'm in a stadium about what the energy is between both the teams. You see Wake out there, obviously the home crowd at Wake. If you ever been to Joel Coliseum, it gets hyped for NC State, UNC, and Duke. Those are big three in state games, and the fans that we were talking to around us were even talking about it. Like these are the sometimes the three games that they go to. So that place is rocking, but the Wake team was feeding off of that energy, while Carolina just looked like they were doing kind of a very casual, relaxed shoot around. I'm not seeing energy from the pregame translate to energy on the court, and it doesn't look like this team's having fun. And that is a team. First of all, can't blame them. We're not either. But case in point, when a team's having fun, they're playing their best. And this team has not played loose, like you've mentioned. They're tight in games, which ends up just being a catch-22 because you're not playing your best game. I remember RJ specifically after he dropped 42 points last year against Miami, it was basically him in his post game saying that he played the best game of his life because he was loose and he was feeling like he was playing pickup basketball. That's where this team needs to be. It's just not where they are.
I completely agree. And I think that you had that stretch there where it looked like maybe are they turning the corner a little bit, because that stretch where we had Ian Jackson just absolutely um, just went off, right? We had a stretch of 20-point games in a row, and part of that coincided with Seth Trimble having the concussion that he had that took him out of action for a couple of games. Uh, so that was a positive because you see somebody like Ian who has always been confident, get more time on the court, get more opportunity, and with that opportunity, he showed everything that he could do, and he's been way more efficient overall this season than I think anybody expected, especially from outside. And his 3-point percentage is higher than maybe even well outside of him. I think maybe anybody would have thought. So that seems like the formula. If you could somehow bottle that or spread that, but it really just it hasn't caught on, or at least consistently. And again, I don't think it's one thing. It's like 8, 9, 10, 11 different things. One of the other patterns that's part of this Groundhog Day is Carolina either being in a lead or being right there with 3 or 4 minutes left in the game. And that's where it really gets frustrating is you have, I think it's now like 10 games where this has been the case. And it makes sense that they're about 500 in these games because that's kind of what, the odds would sort of level out in that direction. If you're playing all these close games, you're not an elite team at finishing, then you're probably not going to have a great record. So that's what's happened. But I think the weight of the moment, A, sort of catches up with them. And the other piece of it is that when, like Florida, for instance, they could go to what they do best, and Kansas too. Like they could get the ball into Hunter Dickinson. There wasn't a whole lot that we could do about it. Uh, and so that's part of where I think you see the roster limitations where if you have your one play you want to run as the opposing team, we've really struggled to stop it. On the other end, it felt like Pitt's a good example where the initial action we want to run, they've scouted it really well. They blow up that action, and then we're left to sort of pick up the pieces the rest of the possession. And Tar Heel Illustrated, Andrew Jones, their editor, had talked about how 2 years ago he had spoken to Leaky Black and maybe RJ too about that exact thing of when they missed the tournament. It was similar. They would have the initial action, the other team would blow it up. They would freelance the rest of the possession, but apparently they don't practice freelance. And so I think they're in a similar situation here where it looks like they don't really have a plan outside of one of the guards is going to just dribble the ball until they can isolate and create a shot. And usually it's a tough shot. And that tends to be at its worst, at its peak in the last 3 to 4 minutes.
Yeah, it's been just really frustrating down the stretch. That pick game I felt pretty good about. And of course, it's a 9 p.m. start, and then you're just fed up because you stayed up super late at 11 o'clock and watched a loss. You were smart. Did you say you dozed off at halftime briefly and then?
Yeah, I end up recording a lot of these with having
Yeah,
a now 1 year old that
right.
he's still getting up pretty early. He's sleeping through the night more, but he's up around 4, so
Yeah,
I can watch the games the next day a lot
yeah,
of times,
yeah, yeah.
which has been better for my, I think my sanity too, just
Probably
overall
so.
stress
Yeah.
level.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's been frustrating as a fan, and obviously, it's not how we wanted this season to go. You look at the guard talent, and it's frustrating because you wanted to see Elliott progress with his shot. It's been pretty stagnant. His turnovers have been actually, if not, I don't know the actual number on it, but he's still turning the ball over and still pushing it when he doesn't need to be, sometimes still forcing passes that he doesn't need to. That's been really frustrating. The 3 point percentage hasn't really improved. RJ's regression, I'm not saying I was asking him to do 25 or 30 a night again, but missing open threes has just been really confusing to watch because you think it's got to be a mental thing at this point. There's so much pressure he put on himself. But aside from it just being partially mental, we've talked about it too. The lack of a true big man in the portal throws off the entire dynamic of the team. Not just talking rebounding and points, but one of the takeaways I think earlier in December that I ended up tweeting out during a game, it was just like Baycott's impact was so much more than we may have even realized. I appreciated him. I didn't appreciate when he would launch threes, although if he's hitting 50% clip, we might take it right now. He was a leader on this team, which seems to be lacking. He was a big body, which pulled defenders away from guards and freed up RJ and gave him all the space he needed. And he's simply not getting that. And when he does, they're just not dropping for whatever reason. So we've leaned on Ian Jackson. Ian Jackson single-handedly won us several games this year. We are in an absolutely awful spot without him. Drake
100%.
Powell has also been a bright spot in a lot of games, maybe a little less consistency, but seeing him put in some corner threes seems to be his favorite spot to kind of square up and hit. We're going to need him going forward, especially on Saturday. He's going to be a big piece of the equation. I'd love to see just the two freshmen take it to the crazies at Duke and come away with somehow a win that we all don't expect. But those two have really been the highlights. But I guess what I'm getting at is like that is the highlight. I don't have much else. Jalen's not a strong five. Van Allen Lubin's a backup five and has been starting several games. You know, this is Carolina we're talking about. We missed in the portal. We don't have the pieces we need, and we're trying to make it work right now. So what does that mean for Saturday's game? What does it mean going forward for this team? Because that's where we have to look. We know what we've been dealt with, what we have the pieces, we know the struggles. What is it going to take for this team to get off the bubble? Like what's gotta click next?
That's a tough question. I almost went like Hubert Davis a long pause during one of his interviews, which I feel for him because
It's tough.
he's clearly going through it right now. Nobody cares more about Carolina than someone like a Hubert Davis.
Of
He's right up
course.
there with Roy and others.
Yeah, and we're gonna have that conversation tonight too.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that it really changes. It feels like at this point that this team is who they are, and there's probably going to be more of the same. And if that's the case, they just do not have that many more games they can lose because they're stacking losses. They probably they probably could lose two, maybe three more, depending on they lose to, and that's about it. And you're talking what there's 10 games left, so
Yeah,
that's not the way that they're trending. You got to play Duke twice
right.
along with that, so that's going to be really tough. Uh, I mean, you're right about the bright spots, and I think there's been so much made about the front court and the misses in the portal, and that has been certainly been a factor. The other piece is that we were expecting and they were relying on Kate Tyson to be a huge part of their
Hmm.
offense, especially. And
Yeah.
we talked in the offseason about how his numbers along with RJ on catch and shoot threes last year were in the 99th percentile in the
Yeah.
country.
Yeah. We're super excited to see it and just maybe
Yeah,
come
and
to
I think,
fruition.
I mean, I, that one's tough because it's not like it would have been one thing if it just didn't translate defensively and he was a liability on the floor. It's again been more of the mental step up because you've seen him in individual games, specifically the LaSalle game was really the last one where he can catch fire in an individual game and get it going. And it's like, okay, that's the guy, but it wouldn't carry over. And it would just go away really fast in terms of his confidence, where he's not even looking for a shot at all, looking at the rim, or when he does let it go, it's it's not the shot you would expect from him. Like at Wake, I mean, he's clearly going through it mentally. That
Mhm.
a shot that goes off the backboard the way that that one did,
Yeah.
that's not because of his form. That's because of what's going on mentally for him. So that's been huge because then it really is just RJ and now Ian Jackson in terms of the perimeter
Yeah.
threats who are consistent.
Hmm.
Occasionally, like you said, Drake will step up in individual games. That SMU game where we played really well, he shoots them out of his zone early,
Sure.
and that made a big difference because we struggle with zone as well, which would make sense because we don't have an interior presence and we don't have consistent perimeter shooting. Um, so you are going to need, I think, to your question, you're going to need those guys to be a little bit more consistent, and you're going to need guys like Drake Powell and Seth Trimble to find a little bit more consistency from beyond the arc.
Hmm.
I think Seth is somebody that that's the one to me that if he can start to regain some of his form from the early season, as concussion is one of those injuries. That's the really tough injury
Yeah.
to have to deal with midseason. He dealt with it last year too. Same
Mhm.
thing. So hopefully he can find it because he had a rough game offensively against Pitt. He's been really active on the boards with 12 rebounds in
Right.
back-to-back games, I
Putting
think
up
it
Harrison
was.
Ingram numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. So that you love to see, but he's got we just can't afford to have our guards have off nights
Yeah.
collectively. And he's somebody that needs also to be the corner three is a huge part of Hubert Davis's offense. So, and that's his shot. And he's not been hitting
Yeah.
that consistently for a while now. So I'd like to see him and Drake on Saturday. If you can hit a couple early, then you start to feel better. And we've seen this kind of at least in a half. And this was true against Pitt. Like you get it going a little bit, you see the ball go in, that confidence spreads. Then you got to carry it over to the second half because the Pitt game's a pretty good example of a lot of other games where we shot it very well in the first half.
Hmm.
Second half, we're 1 for 11 from three.
Right.
And there's just been too many halves like that. Um, again, early in the season it was first halves, now it's second halves. Anyway, all that to say that you got to get more from your best players, which are your guards on this team. And I think you from the front court perspective, you just need those guys to do enough because collectively, if you look at the numbers, Lubin and Washington together, they're playing about 34, 35 minutes, and they're averaging somewhere between together in those minutes 12 points and 10 rebounds. That's not quite Baycott numbers, but it's actually not that far away.
Hmm.
I get that that's just like counting stats, and you watch them play defense, and they're far away from what Baycott did
Sure.
last year.
Yeah.
Um, Amongst like just being, how they're scoring on offense too. Anyway, all that to say that I think it's going to have to be the guards and the wings. It's going to have to be RJ and Ian and Elliott, Seth and Drake who carry this team. And those are the guys you need more consistency from.
Yeah. I mean, the motto for the gym sometimes is no off days. It's got to be no off nights for these shooters.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't afford that. You've put yourself into a hole and you got to climb your way out. So, um, as a fan, I'm hopeful, not encouraged by any means right now. I mean, it is what it is. Yes, we've been busy for the last month and a half and we haven't had a chance to pod. It's also really tough sometimes to find the motivation to want to talk in depth about a lot of the issues, right? Like we know we're one voice in the room of many. We talk about it together, you and me offline most every day, but obviously wanted to get one in before the Duke game to kind of catch everybody up on our thoughts on all this. But
One more thing I was going to say too, you touched on Elliott, and he seems to be like a true catalyst for this team. You look at the numbers plus minus when he's on the court versus off. So I think for this team to make the tournament, it starts with Elliott,
mhm,
and he honestly, and I'm just trying to think of how I want to say this. I mean, I was just going to say it. He needs to grow up. He needs to mature,
mhm,
and you just watch him on the court, and he's too up and down with his reactivity and how he gets frustrated and then takes out that frustration in a foul or tries to draw a foul or
sure.
grab somebody to
Yeah.
get a call. We didn't really see that last year, so I don't know what's going on with that, but that just can't happen because he's too valuable. You can't, and the Pitt game's again most recent, but also a good example of what's happened over and over. Is you lose him in key moments, and all of a sudden that changes the dynamic of the team. Because
Right.
RJ is a good facilitator, but he can't do what Elliott can do, especially when Elliott's on. Like that Wake game was one of Elliott's better games, right? Where was that the one that he had 13 assists, something like that?
Right.
12 or
Yeah. Yeah.
13?
He's putting up good assist numbers sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you need to have him on the floor. So he's got to really take more responsibility from a leadership standpoint and just stop with some of that because it doesn't help him. It takes him out of the game and it really hurts the team.
Yeah. And I think all this goes back to no off nights for sure. Elliott being a leader, limiting the turnovers, continuing to be a threat to drive the hoop, but he can't be out of control. And he's not, I'll be honest, he's not going to get there with Duke's defense
No,
on Saturday. So you don't need to try. I don't want to see these shots going up that are just off the wall and then complaining or looking for a foul. Like you gotta be running more offensive sets as a point guard right now. I was talking to my dad the other day and he said, I want the point guard to be a point guard. And yeah, a lot of times he's forced into kind of an ISO situation and trying to do too much. And that's been, an issue off and on the last couple of years that this team is trying to take one-on-one NBA style balls sometimes when the sets are not there and not happening. But a lot of things have to click for us to have a chance on Saturday. I think you're right about Seth needing to be more consistent. There's got to be scoring from every angle, and not only scoring. There's got to be a higher energy going forward. It starts in February. January is behind you. Like February 1, you're at Duke. If you don't bring the energy, you're gonna get run out of that building quick. And I kind of expect that might be what happens. This is the first year, and I could be proven wrong, and I'm happy to be proven wrong, that I am going into this game thinking this one may not be close. And I don't want to be that fan, but I haven't seen enough, and I've, on the converse, seen more than enough from Duke and what they've been doing that the two combine is kind of a scary formula right now. We'll see. I'm gonna have friends over, gonna have some pizza, gonna have some drinks, gonna do the usual, go where you go, do what you do, wear whatever your lucky shirt is, but I'm not sold on Saturday being fun at this point.
your parents are going to make their pregame pizza though, right?
They have to. Yeah,
Okay.
just like the Final Four. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the superstitions have to happen
They still
regardless
live
of
on. Yeah.
how we're feeling or not. Yeah, I'm with you. And it's not just where you are as a fan, like you were saying. It's the the number for this line is probably gonna end up being somewhere certainly in double digits and maybe closer to like 13, 14 points. Uh, so even Vegas is not thinking that this is going to be
Right.
a close game. And the way both teams have played, it shouldn't be. But to your point, the energy's got to be there. If you can't bring the intensity for this game, what are we even doing? And when this team has brought intensity, especially on the defensive end, and been able to sustain that, like I think about that start of the second half against Florida, where they looked like one of the best teams in the
It
country,
was
or
unbelievable. Yeah.
again
An
until like the
immediate
last 3 or
comeback.
4
Yeah.
minutes.
You get
During,
because you're forcing your team to have the offensive possessions based on your defense. You're gonna get the ball more, and then you have more opportunities. And just like that, the lead was cut. But yeah,
yeah, and that's how they have to.
yeah,
That's how they have to play.
right.
We just have not. I don't know if that's sustainable for 40 minutes with as tight a rotation as we're starting to see now, for good reason of certain players who Tyson and Withers now to seem to be working their way out of the rotation. So you're really talking about probably like seven guys, something like that.
Yep.
So that can just wear you out. But that's the way they need to play, and they need
Mhm.
to play that way against Duke. When they've played that way, they've been pretty effective. Duke is so just huge in terms of just overall roster size, talent across the board that I think we can bring intensity and it may not still put us over the top, especially at Cameron, the way that
Sure.
environment's going to be. Um, but I hope we at least bring that intensity because again, otherwise, where do you go from here? And Hubert alluded to this after the Boston College game. This place means a lot to a lot of people, including him and alumni in a lot of places, and show the pride of putting on that jersey and the unique opportunity that it is.
Mhm.
Knowing that it's also about these guys individually, but they are Carolina, and there are so many guys who played for UNC that would do anything to get one more minute on the floor in a Carolina uniform. And these guys are representing all of those guys whenever they play.
Right.
So I hope they can at least kind of put on a performance that represents all of those guys in the right way.
Sure.
That's what you hope to see. And we can get into some of the specifics of the matchup if you want.
Yeah.
It's going to be an uphill climb.
I don't want,
That's
but we
fine.
should.
That's fine. We don't need to. Cooper Flag is good.
He's I think he was 17 at one point.
He was
He just
17
turned
at one
18,
point.
like every
Um,
human does, but we love to
he's
highlight
now
it.
18. Yeah, that's how age works.
Yeah.
It goes up.
Yeah. ESPN's
Um,
learning.
yeah. So I mean, he's been better than I think anyone expected, which is saying a lot because the
Yeah.
hype
Yeah.
was really high. But without going too much into to the weeds of the matchup, the Duke's last two games were actually pretty close against State and Wake. They're not invincible. This is
Sure.
not a team that is unbeatable. It's going to take a big time effort, and you have to you have to make it hard on Flag. Like you have to make it so that he can't just get to his spots. If he has a lot of space to operate, he's lethal. He can get to the mid range. He can get to the rim. He can set other people up. So you're probably going to see Drake Powell on him a decent amount, I would
Yep.
guess.
That's
Maybe
my hope.
Withers if Withers plays at all. Um, and hopefully you can contain him. And that's really the goal. And if somebody else is trying to do too much, like Colin Knippel has done that at times this year, I think you kind of encourage that. You don't give him space on the 3-point jumper, but if he's going to put up a lot of shots, that's not a bad thing. And Duke struggles to create. They really still don't have a true point guard, even though Sion James has done a decent job at the point guard spot. But they don't have guys off the dribble who can get in the lane like Carolina does. And what State and Wake did was they were able to push them out behind the 3-point line, make it difficult for them from the perimeter.
Mhm.
They struggle to shoot it from three. They don't have a true back to the basket big guy, even though they have a lot of length and athleticism in the paint. Anyway, I'm starting to talk myself into this being possible. I'm going to stop
Yeah.
because
It's the hope that kills you.
that's that's right. Um, love Ted Lasso. I know that's not just a Ted Lasso line, but anyway,
Ted Lasso, Wayne Gretzky.
yeah, Michael Scott.
Michael Scott.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's still a part of me that hopes like maybe we can see something special,
Sure.
and there have been surprises in the rivalry.
Yeah.
Um,
2020. I mean, we were
yep,
trash in 2020, and that game went OTs.
yep. 95 Duke was terrible, and that game went to double overtime.
Yeah.
Um, so you never know. And Jay Billis will say that it always delivers, which is going to be a bold statement. We'll see. But like he always says it, so
You
he's
putting money on that one, Jay?
yeah. We're going to see if it holds up. But maybe we see something like that. Hopefully, we see a close game. I honestly wouldn't be that surprised, even though what I'm expecting to happen is that we get behind either in the first half or early second half and just can't get all the way back. Similar to the Alabama game where we were able to cut it to like 8, but they usually had a double digit margin and we just were arm's length away. The other thing that I could see happening is we are able to come back if we're behind and it's back and forth like these games have been, and you get to 3 minutes and Duke's been really good at executing in the last 3 to 4 minutes of games. We saw that in the State and Wake games towards the end of the game.
Yep.
They were able to execute, make plays, and then defensively they're really, really good. So yeah, it's frustrating because I remember you and I doing this podcast last year going into this game and the excitement we had, and we
Hmm.
didn't know how it was going to go, but we had some confidence that
Yep.
obviously had a good shot to win, felt good about Carolina's what we were bringing into that game, even coming off the loss to Georgia Tech beforehand. And this year it's just deflating. It doesn't
Hmm.
have that same excitement. There's not even a villain. Like I know we talked about Cooper Flag could be the next villain, but I miss Kyle Filipowski in that role, man. He just like he got me more fired up. Flag's just kind of like, eh. I mean, he's really
He's
good.
good. Yeah.
He's kind of obnoxious, but I don't feel that. Again, that might change after Saturday. It
Sure.
always
It
has a
usually
way
does.
of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll have to see if something crazy happens because it can and it has in the past. And last year it was our transfers that brought the energy and ended up having 20 plus, 30 plus point games. I would love to see that from Ian. Ian feeds off of that energy. He is built for the show. So I
Yeah,
wouldn't doubt that he just goes off. And you're going to need him to. And
yeah.
in addition to that, I know there's a place in RJ's heart that does not want to lose in Cameron his last game. As much of an off year as it's felt at times, he's still putting up good numbers. You know, it's not like he's been out there being a negative influence or a bad player or anything of the sort. He's not last year's RJ right now, but I'd like him to be for one night, and we're gonna need him to be. So, um, yeah, I agree with all your takeaways. Anything else you want to add on the Duke game? I was just thinking about Teletubby cutaways. I got a little distracted during some of your commentary, but over under on Teletubby takeaways or anything of the sort,
25.
post game
Um,
speeches.
yeah, I mean, all I really want to see is John Shire apologizing to the seniors again for losing, which was the
Sounds great.
funniest thing. Juxtaposed again by the students throwing water or beer, whatever it was,
We'll,
on primarily on press row.
we'll always have 22.
Yeah, that too. Um, I mean, from a just broader place, talking about RJ, he has a chance to win 4 times out of 5 at Cameron if they can pull it off. So that would be pretty amazing if they can. Um, he struggled against Tyrese Proctor, and that's who they tend to put on him because they have multiple guys this year they can put on him who have the height and length advantage, and that's he struggled some with that. I'd love to see him go off a little bit in this game. I think that'd be awesome. I think you're right. I think Ian Jackson needs to have a 20 plus game, really more like a 30-point game for
Yep.
us to be where we want to be in this one. And somebody like Elliott needs to be under control, and you need to get contributions from the other guys we mentioned. So
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I'm holding out that hope that just when we think we know how this rivalry is going to go, that sometimes it does get turned on its head.
Yeah.
But
You never know.
um, I'm not expecting that to happen. And um, then you have to pick up the pieces from there. If they do lose, that's 13-10 going into the stretch of the season in February, and you're basically on life support in terms of your tournament hopes at that point.
Yeah, because then you've got Pitt again, who you just took a loss to. You've got a game on the road at Clemson. You've got a game on the road at Syracuse. And granted, Syracuse is having one of their worst years. I think talking with Brian, who was on the podcast last year previewing Syracuse, he said they're about 117th in Ken Palm, where UNC is actually 39th, which shocked me. Hadn't checked on that number in a while, but
Strength of
um,
schedule. I mean,
it is. It
we
is.
played a we played a very difficult schedule, and even somebody
That's
like Stanford has actually looked pretty good since we played them, and
right.
took at the time was a quad 3 loss. I think it's still
Sure.
quad 2 now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's a tough stretch because you basically have these 3 games, and then you have a lot of landmines of
Yeah.
games that can't help you that are quad 3, even quad 4
Right.
that you have to win. If you lose, you're basically done.
Yeah.
So, um, and the Pitt game, I think that they bring more energy to the Smith Center. Like they get up even more for that one than they do for the one at home
You know why?
because, yeah, um, I think it's the Diaz Graham brothers really have something about coming to Chapel Hill. I think it's the twins,
Must be the
not
only
the other
brothers in the
brothers.
building. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then Clemson is another bad matchup. I heard somebody joke recently that Ian Shefflin already has 15 rebounds, and that game's not going to be played for another couple
Right.
weeks.
Yeah. He's a
So
machine. Yeah.
yeah, it's tough, man. I don't,
Mhm.
I don't have a lot of
That's where
positive
I'm at
things
too. It's okay.
things
I'm
to
not
say.
expecting you to have too much positivity or detailed analysis on all this because it's been very frustrating. But I will point a little bit to a tweet that you had sent me from Brian Ives' handle Away to Worthy on X, which I've always just loved that nod to James Worthy in the classic call. But he was tweeting out some information about North Carolina and how over the last 4 years, we've not performed well in quad one games. If you think we've lost a lot of big games and you're like, man, we've been right on the cusp of getting that win, or that win, it's because we have. Let me just go through these numbers real quick. So Hubert's first season, 21-22, we go 8-9. Obviously, we end up in an 8 seed in the tournament, make an incredible run. Still one of our favorite Carolina years and a lot of fans' favorite years. That said, 50-50 in quad one. The year after, started as the number 1 seed, missed the tournament. We go 1-9. Last year, go 10-4. Pretty good. We like how the transfers fit in last year. Thought Hubert did really good things with the system. And then suddenly we're back this year to 1-8 as of January 28th. That doesn't sit well. It's tough to read those numbers. That makes it 20-30 in quad one games over the last 4 seasons. So no matter how the rest of this year goes, it hasn't been a success so far. It has had its fair share of struggles, and it will likely continue to. So I want to just pick your brain because you and I actually haven't talked too much about this, and we don't have to dive into specifics about what's going to happen to Hubert if X happens, if Y happens. But I do agree that he's definitely on the hot seat in a way. I'm not saying if he only makes the NIT this year that A, will even accept the invite, or B, that he'll get canned. He's got Roy's backing, which is worth a lot. In just given his legacy at Carolina. Um, I'm just not sure how you defend those quad one records. I think if this year we make the NIT, next year it's make or break. Um, I want to hear your thoughts first, and then I'll kind of chime in with some of where I'm at. But um, a lot of fans out there ready for him to be done yesterday, obviously. But it's complicated. We know that.
Yeah, and I mean that we know that there's also folks that were ready to fire Roy um,
Oh yeah, nothing
every
new.
year.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't want to minimize the frustration because that's real, and we're obviously frustrated too. And Carolina, it's not just lip service to say there's a standard. The other stat that gets thrown out is just the seed line that Carolina's been on historically, and the percentage of NCAA tournaments, the number of number one seeds and number two seeds. It's staggering. You're not usually in a position, A, that you're on the bubble.
Mhm.
We've never been lower than an 8 seed when we've made the tournament. And that's only been, I think, 4 times, something like that. So it's not a place that this program is used to being in. And it's not a place this program wants to be. Hubert himself has said that part of him taking the job was that Carolina needed to be essentially one of the top programs, be at that level and perform at that level every year.
Mhm.
And we had a couple seasons before he came in where that didn't happen, right? We were
Right.
missed the tournament and then we were an 8 seed in Roy's last 2 years. So yeah, we're definitely moving in a direction we don't want to go. Um, as far as Hubert, it's so tough for me because when you and I talked last year, we were very confident going into the season that it would be a turning point for him in a positive way,
Hmm.
bouncing back from missing the tournament. And he exceeded our expectations. I don't think we thought they were going to be a number one seed. I
No.
don't think we thought they would go 17-3 in the ACC, be 25-6.
Right.
You come off the season thinking, all right, we got momentum now, and now it's about stacking another strong performance.
And transfers want to come here, and
That's
we're going
it.
to
I
start
mean, that
rolling.
was the feeling
Yeah.
was me especially got carried away in the offseason of like, oh, here's this transfer over here and this guy over here, and look at these highlights, Craig, and just imagine what it could be like. And we're going to have a number one versus number two matchup in Allen Fieldhouse, all of these things. So a couple of things. You see how year to year the current landscape is just so different, where you're talking about a different team every single year in a way that, yeah, there was a different team before, but you're not team building in the same developmental approach. It is a unique individual team each time. And so there's more variability. Uh, they've got to take a different approach in the portal.
Mhm.
They can't do the same strategy where if you strike out on a guy or if you have somebody like Kate Tyson that doesn't work out and he's not playable, it just changes your whole season. So, I mean, that would be one thing I would say is I'd like to see them bring in more guys, have competition, have some options, and with guys coming in knowing like, hey, you want to play here, you got to earn your spot type of thing, um, and just see how the chips land. I mean, Alabama's kind of done that with the number of players they have. So I think that's a better strategy than, all right, we've got our guy at this spot. If it doesn't work out, we don't really know. We don't really have a backup plan. Um, so that's something that I think I'd like to see different. I guess overall with Hubert, one of the things that is a little concerning is I mentioned before some of the patterns between 22, 23, and so 2 years ago and this year, where offensively it just looked like what are we even running at times where it was predictable. It was
Hmm.
the defense was able to know what was coming, and then we're left kind of reeling and having to take in 22, 23. It was Caleb Love mostly just volunteering his tribute and being the one to take the impossible shot all the time. Now it pick your guy. I mean, RJ's definitely been that guy. Ian is at times. So that to me is concerning because I do think that Hubert runs some really, really good offensive stuff at times. Now you can like we can have a debate about that in terms of his offensive scheme and what could be different, but we've gotten a lot of open looks too that we
Hmm.
just have not made. So it's a
Right.
combination of is the offense always translating? Are these guys executing? Do they understand what they're being asked to do all the time? Or are they not able to do it for whatever reason? There's some disconnect there. And that does come back to coaching because part of coaching is it's not just having a great scheme. I remember Carolina football several years ago. This was during the Fedora years where our defense was super complicated and our guys could not execute it. And we were terrible on defense. So like it doesn't matter if you can't run it. Tony Dungy made a career in the NFL out of the Tampa 2 defense, which was super simple, but it was designed that way so guys could read and react and use their athleticism. And then you're moving faster. And sometimes it looks like our guys are moving slow because they're in their head, they're trying to figure things out. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of just getting carried away here, I think, going on one of my classic rants on this, but um there is some kind of disconnect. And that ultimately it's not just on the coach. Like the players have to execute, and we saw last year that they did at a high level. So part of it is personnel, right? If he has the right personnel, I think he can be really effective. We've seen that.
Mhm.
So it's his responsibility to get those guys in and make sure to do whatever you can to maximize and leverage the resources that are there to do that. I do think that I think he's a solid coach. Now, where I think what we're seeing is maybe some of the margin for within a roster, the margin for error, I guess, in terms of the structure of the roster. And again, if he's got the right guys that fit his system, things look really good. If not, he definitely adapts. He's trying a lot of different things, but we've seen 2 times now that no matter how hard he's working to change it, it didn't get fixed for whatever reason. Again, there's a lot of reasons. I'm not putting it all on him, but ultimately it comes back to him. And so, yeah, I agree. I wouldn't have said he was going to be on the hot seat this season. Even now, if they can win a decent number of games, even if they miss the tournament and it's close, it's more going to carry into next season is the year.
Hmm.
He's got to deliver next year.
Yeah.
If they just bottom out completely, then maybe you have another conversation. I think if they quit on the season, if they give up, we might have a different conversation. That hasn't happened. These guys are not getting blown out of games. Um, so what happens actually in these next 10 games is pretty important because there is a sense of hope for next season and we just got a top 10 recruit.
Hmm.
Like for all the people who have complained about Hubert's recruiting, he's been able to land some of our highest rated recruits here between Ian Jackson and now Caleb Wilson coming in next year. So there's going to be a core to build around where you can turn it around in a year. Uh, but there's going to be a lot of pressure next year.
Mhm.
And I definitely did not think that the way the season ended last year, we'd be having these conversations because it just didn't seem like it would. It didn't seem like it didn't seem like there was going to be a roller coaster situation. It felt like there was one blip, there was one dip in the 3 years, and he pulled his way out of it. We were just going to keep kind of going back to what Carolina had always been, and that just hasn't happened.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, I echo all of it. I don't have too much to add. I think it's more complicated than Fire Hubert. Um, we've seen it with Fire Roy, like you mentioned, but there's NIL changing faster than anybody can keep up with. There are definite questions to be asked of why are other schools, seemingly able to pay more or get some of these bigger transfers to come to them and not land in the Carolina system. Why wouldn't you want to play for Carolina? Well, potentially the money. You're getting paid somewhere else and that matters, then that's where you're going to go. We saw it with Cliff going to Alabama. We've talked about it. He would have been a starter at Carolina, blue blood, and he's coming off the bench a lot of games and getting some points, getting some time, but nothing like he would have at Carolina. So whatever Nate Oates offered clearly did the trick.
Yeah, he has his ways beyond just the dollar overall money amount. Because Alabama doesn't actually they don't have as much NIL as probably as Carolina does. But I think to build off what you're saying, the other piece is Carolina needs to rebuild their NBA pipeline, and that's part of the problem for these guys who, I mean, these players now weren't alive when Vince Carter was at UNC, right? Like, I mean, they know who Vince Carter is, obviously, because he's getting his jersey retired at everywhere that he played, which is pretty awesome.
It is. Yeah.
But that's the last All-Star that we had was Vince Carter, and he played in the 90s at Carolina. That's a long time.
Yeah.
So all that to say, hopefully Ian Jackson gets drafted. He looks like somebody who um, feels like if he keeps going the way he has this season, should solidly be, in my opinion, in the first round. That's a positive. You can build on that with somebody like Caleb Wilson. And slowly but surely, I think that's how they build momentum and continue to be able to land these high level recruits. Um, so I don't think it's impossible for him to turn this around. I do think the other factor is it's uh, it's becoming clear that I mean Hubert, this is a mission led experience for him in terms of the job, and his focus is the coaching and development of these guys. And there's so much other stuff that goes on with this job
Yep.
that he even said recently it might have been with Adam and Jones talking about how he's an introvert and all of the like other stuff, whether it's I would imagine he didn't speak specifically to like fundraising or things like that, but like all the other stuff that talking to
hmm
agents that go along with the
hmm
job is exhausting. So how much longer does he want to coach
Yeah.
if it's his choice? So there's that part of the question in the equation too. So there's a lot of questions that are out there right now about his tenure, how long it lasts, and where does the program go if and when he leaves the job, no matter how that happens.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that insight into feeling exhausted by, I mean, to be honest, the current state of the game. And I just don't know how much I like Hubert. I believe in him. I'm supportive of him right now. I don't with especially with that angle on it, know how long a guy can last and not just last, he could last, but he may not stay inspired. He's not going to be his best coaching self. He's not going to be thrilled with getting some of these recruits somehow ending up at other universities that he could have landed because not that he's not inspired, but he almost can't keep up. He is in a way an old school coach like
Yeah.
Roy, right? Like he's a Carolina values guy and I just think if we end up looking elsewhere, we have to find that perfect fit for NIL. Um, it just is the game as much as I have issues with a lot of the things that go on and how the money is dealt. It's a business. Um, we're not getting the basketball from the 90s and 2000s, 2010s back. Um, the game's changed, and if you don't have a coach that can keep up with it, then you are going to be facing some issues. So I think it's one of those things that time can tell. But again, I understand the frustration of NIT or not great, 8 seed, not great, missing the tournament, all that jazz. Um, he exceeded expectations last year, and then we're back down this year, and that's part of the roller coaster that we've been on. And I think if you just look at his mannerisms on the sideline, the stomping and yelling, like I know the man's passionate, and you can't just blame the kids because ultimately it does go back up to the coach, especially when you've had a guy like RJ who's been there. He is your leader. You know, there should be no reason for the team on the court to be having as many confusing moments and frustrations and scrambling sets and running ISO plays as they've had and as we've seen this year. Um, Hubert's clearly livid, so his passion is there, but it's like what is not translating right now? And I think I just don't know if we can answer that question until we have more time. There's too many
Yeah, I think
variables
it.
to
No,
to know.
I agree. I think that's it would be us just sort of like grasping at speculation of what it is and
Yeah,
possibilities. But you bring up a really good point. He's still, even though it's exhausting for him, as he said, he's still fully invested when it comes to, like he says, when it's game time, when it's game day, he's full
for
go.
sure.
And you
Yeah,
see that. And I don't think, like you said, no one questions his passion.
yeah,
There's just this disconnect. I do think that if he gets a general manager before, like right as the offseason starts, or even a little bit before, that could make a really big difference
yeah.
and take some of these other things out of his purview that are some of the exhausting things. So I
Focus on
think
being a
that's the
coach.
next
Yeah,
step is
yeah,
if you look at some of these programs that are navigating this landscape really well, whether that's Alabama, we've talked about Duke getting a GM pretty early on,
yep.
but you
Huge.
can have these other staff members, and I think that's key is building out this staff beyond just the coaching staff that he has and having outside voices outside of the Carolina family. I understand that that's very important to him, but
Sure.
it become pretty insular if you do it that way. And also if you surround yourself with people who are in some cases some of the closest people to him, like a Jeff Lebo who played with him. Um, maybe they have a very transparent relationship, but it can also be sort of this, you know, if you're with your buddies, they may just tell you the more positive things. I
Exactly.
know that can go other ways too, where it's like I
Sure.
can actually be super honest with you.
Sure.
Um, anyway, all that to say, I think that would be positive, a GM, and then hiring outside voices so you get different perspectives and building out a team of staff that has some of these other positions that you might need, whether it's analytics related or some of this other stuff that I think will just take some of the burden off of him so he can focus on the stuff that he loves and that he's really good at.
Yeah, 100%. And if I can be, real with you as a friend, you don't you hire me onto the show, but you were getting a little too hopeful for the Duke game earlier. I want you to reel that back in. Be where you were this morning. Table your expectations. Don't throw down any bets.
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to throw down any bets, I would be betting against us. So I'm not going to do that.
Can't do it. No, no.
Yeah, I gave a prediction on a Duke podcast last night. I don't know what I was thinking, so I committed to this thing back in December when I was still convinced we were going to turn the quarter,
Brutal.
and I just
Lesson
didn't have the
learned.
heart to cancel. But I was like, "This,
You
what am I
can't
even
you
going to
can't do that
say?"
because then they're gonna call you out live if you cancel for that
Yeah, I mean
reason.
that was gonna be even worse. So I just took it on the chin. That's fine. They were really nice about it. But my prediction was 82 to 66, which and I thought more about it, and I was like, it might actually be a little bit lower scoring. You know how it takes time to settle into this game because
Yeah.
these guys are so there's so much intensity, there's so much
Right.
electricity,
Right.
and whether we like this or not, not the same as the night that Zion, it was the Zion Duke game in Cameron.
Hmm.
The electricity was at a different level. The hype was at a different level. Obama's there, like the
Right.
Two Chains was there, and
So
Three
is
Rings,
yeah,
yeah,
three rings.
Three Rings, aka Roy Williams was there. So the electricity was off the charts, and because it's Cooper Flag, there's going to be some of that to this game. Uh, so I don't know. It could be a little lower scoring. It'll be very interesting to see how Duke handles this. These are
Hmm.
still young players.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's what
so
they're
I'm
playing.
talking myself back into it again because I'm like, what if Khan has an off night? What if
Yeah.
Cooper,
Yeah.
presses a little bit?
What if the
Uh,
whole team is sick? There was some issues last game that were replayed. Maybe the whole team has it. If they lose, that's the narrative. So they at least have an out.
yeah, I mean, I know it's cheesy to say Duke is puke, but man, that was.
It's accurate. You just when
Look,
you alley it up, you got to slam it home. That's it.
I didn't want to say that one out loud, and then it just happened. That was brutal for I guess Shire said it was cramping for Malawatch. I don't think we'd seen a player throw up in the middle of a game since Puff Johnson in the national championship,
Yeah.
and not to that extreme, but
Yikes. Yeah.
yeah. I hope everybody's healthy for this game. I want to see both teams full go. I want to see Jalen Washington back. We don't know if he's going to play for sure. We don't know if
That's a
Malik
huge
Brown's
question
going to play
mark
for
we
Duke for
haven't.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm not looking forward to 6:30 on Saturday.
Yeah, what's your plan? You gonna watch in a dark room by yourself?
Let's see. So, my wife has a friend coming into town. It's pretty close to my son's bedtime. Yeah, I may actually find somewhere else to watch by myself. I like the idea of dark room. I think that's probably
I'm having
probably a
some
good
folks
call.
over. I know you're far away, but if you want me to zoom you in, I can just set you up on the couch, hang
That
out.
actually would be pretty fun. And I can't remember if we talked about this. I did that before when I was in New Zealand, and I
That's
couldn't get
right.
the game. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so my friend actually made a body, like stuffed
So good.
replica, and put the computer where the head would be. So, um,
What are friends for? That's
yeah,
it.
yeah, we might have to. We'll see. I may just go full dark and
You know
just.
everybody. They'd love to see you, It'd be great. Be a way to catch up and, we can trauma bond together.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think this is one we want to go through alone.
Yeah.
I can at least last through the first half. Now, the funny thing is, say all these things, and then if it turns out in a positive way, I'll come on and be like, we knew that Ian Jackson was going to carry us. So
Yeah. Yeah. Delete this podcast now.
that's right.
It's okay. My worst take of the offseason was hopeful that Cade Tyson would in some way be a semi replacement of Cormac Ryan, which I guess is
Yeah.
technically true because he had one good game of threes. So if you're going by technicalities, I wasn't wrong.
Yeah.
But I was pretty wrong. I was pretty wrong.
Yeah, everyone missed on it. Then that's the thing.
I feel for him. That's tough. Yeah.
It is tough because he seems like a solid person, and you
Yeah,
hate to see that happen
for
because
sure.
he's got the ability, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so um, all right. Well, so what? Let me ask you this: if they do pull out it's not a miracle. We call it like very unexpected upset. What what happens? How does it all go down? What do you think leads to that happening?
Ian Jackson goes for 25. Elliott goes for probably 8 assists. Got to have ball movement.
Yep.
Seth probably has a huge rebounding game. And I think we get supplemental 3-point support from Drake and Seth both. And maybe even get one or two from Elliott. I think you're right. You touched on it earlier. You have to hit from the perimeter. Um, but if we're not just talking offense, it's the energy. We go back to it every time. I don't want to see this team come out on just like dud energy. We've already lost. Season's over. Kind of like you saw at the end of the pick game where it looked very deflating. A, they looked out of sorts. B, they looked out of energy. Something kind of made them hit a wall. Um,
Yeah.
that's probably the biggest thing for me, but you need all that to happen and to you need to pester Cooper Flag. I mean, you have to double team him at times. You have to be kind of just all up in his grill, in his space when he's trying to back down. I want to see Seth get in there. I want to see Elliott get in there, get some hands in there. Granted, Elliott will probably get 5 feet away and get called for a whistle before he even gets close. So maybe we allow Seth to get down there. But we've seen success over the years when we've double teamed some of the big guys and been able to kind of swat the ball away or just disrupt their game. Throw Cooper out of his element and then force them to make some perimeter shots like they haven't in recent games. And again, the hype around this game is totally different than any other game. You're right. It's still his first time playing in the Duke Carolina rivalry. It's still Khan's first time playing as well. So I think there's some open doors, and here I go talking myself into it. Granted, it was a prompt, so I can still pin it back on you for giving me this little bit of hope. But I think
Well,
those
I
are
think
the
that's
main things that have to happen. And
yeah.
Hubert has to take his glasses off and stomp permanently throughout the game. Just it can't stop at all.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing we haven't talked about with it, one of the open doors you're talking about, I think Khan potentially, I wouldn't, he's not a liability on defense. I wouldn't go that far, but he's somebody that you can target potentially. And they're going to have to pick up probably Proctor and James and then Foster when he's in on 2 out of the 3 of Elliott, RJ, and Ian. One of those guys is going to have a matchup
Mm.
against Khan.
Yeah,
Can you get have an advantage there?
get him in
Um,
foul trouble.
that too. So I want to see that. The other thing I'd love to see is that Jay Wash is healthy and plays.
Yep.
And this is going all the way back to when you were at the state game in Raleigh. We haven't talked about this on the pod since it happened, but he gets the block, right? He gets the bucket, he gets the block, and then he does the pack down, wolves down, whatever. Hand symbol. I love the interview afterwards that he said that it wasn't him. That just was one of the funniest things that I've seen in a long
He
time
blacked out, bro.
in basketball. Yeah, no, that's what
Yeah,
I don't think he was lying. I think he genuinely
I think he did not know. He didn't
I think
remember.
he genuinely, yeah, just blacked out, had no recollection of the
Yep.
fact that that was him. And not only was it you, but the camera was right on you when it
Right
happened.
on you.
Everybody knows it was you.
Yep. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's very much like that's what happened if you're a Marvel fan. That's what happens to the Hulk when he turns into the Hulk. He doesn't really have recollection of Bruce Banner or the other way around. So we need to see the Wolves down Washington. We need to see that version, that guy who he brings a different kind of attitude. He gets a little bit nasty, right? And he just plays tough. That's the guy that we need to see. So hopefully he plays A and B. He can turn into Wolves down Washington. And I think that gives us a shot.
Devil's down Drake.
There you go. I like that too.
Turn the horns upside down. Yep. Maybe yeah, that's where I got to put my money now. So,
You do an upside down Bull City, Bull City sign.
right,
Is that what we're
right. Yeah. Hey, nobody knows how it's going to go Saturday, but one thing for sure is that all the fans will be watching. As always, we'll be locked in. Um, I wouldn't say I'm looking forward to it, but I'm looking forward to seeing some friends, looking forward to the pizza, looking forward to some drinks, looking forward to a Saturday where it's gonna be 60 degrees here in North Carolina. Get to go to a brewery beforehand. Should be a good Duke Carolina day. It always is a nice time. Um, I won't do a score prediction. I'm not going to say how many we're going to lose by or how many we're going to win by. I just can't. I can't put it out there in the universe. Whatever happens, happens, and there'll be a lot of elements to control what happens. We'll just kind of leave it up to the basketball gods. But anything else you want to touch on? I know we again hadn't been on in about 7 weeks or so. Glad to get this one out before the big game. And yeah, like I said, I guess I'll say looking forward to it because I still am as a fan. It's just bracing myself, but looking forward to it.
I just have a quick point out. See, we mentioned Vince Carter, but
Sure.
really cool that his jersey was retired by both the Raptors and this, I think it was this last weekend, New Jersey Nets. I guess not Brooklyn, but really cool and well deserved honor as somebody who obviously was a great Tar Heel, but an
Yep.
unbelievable pro in both of those places, and then the longevity that he had as well, and just see his passion, the emotion, especially that Toronto was where he started, right? Toronto was
Yeah.
where
Yeah. That was neat.
he became Air Canada. He had all the success that he had at the beginning of his career, and you could just see the emotion, the passion. I've been waiting actually to use that GIF in a Carolina game. So if things start trending in the right direction, I'm not going to use it until the very end. So I wouldn't use it mid game and
Yeah.
risk jinxing it. But
Sure.
I been wanting to use that GIF all season. But happy for him. I mean, that's pretty incredible, and Hall of Famer on top of that. So he
Yep.
just again well deserved all of those things, and
Yeah.
to see the support from other guys in the Carolina family. Uh, Somebody like Roy Williams, of course, and others who supported him. Pretty cool to see all of that too.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great point out. The only NBA player to ever play across 4 different decades.
Unbelievable.
Completely unbelievable. I can't even think about doing that in my actual job
Right.
right now. Yeah.
I
And I
love,
enjoy I enjoy my line of work, but 4 decades in the same job. Come on. Good for him. Yeah, I think that's a great point out to close the show, and we're gonna need that Vince energy come Saturday. So, Jay, good to be on with you as always. I have a feeling we'll be doing these a lot more frequently in the next few weeks. No matter how the season goes, it's always just nice to be on, and appreciate everybody still engaging over on X. We are on Blue Sky as well. We don't know exactly where we're going to be in the social sphere going forward. A whole lot up in the air in terms of that, but for now, we're on X, Blue Sky. Find us there. Continue to engage, and appreciate everybody's support. And go Heels, beat Duke.
Go Heels.